usually they would sign before the season started. You know, I appreciate those guys. We're in a business, and we have to be realistic. And my father used to always have this thing where, as I said, people felt that he was very fair, but he was tough when he needed to be. And so he was in some pretty tough contract negotiations with players. It was always nice is how Mel Blunt is one. I mentioned Mel's name. Really long contract holdout, 1977. And Mel says what was, what was really touching to him is he finally signs this deal. He opens what he still works on is the Mel Blunt Youth Homes, which is an organization he runs for at-risk youth, both in Georgia and in Western Pennsylvania. And my father flew to Georgia to open the Mel Blunt Youth Home with him right at the end of this negotiation, so that, again, in my father's case, he was always able to separate the business from the personal and maintain those relationships. Coaches always want players in practice, so there's that side of it, and so we're on the coach's side, and certainly always encourage that. But I think we've shown that we have this understanding that players' careers are short, so their ability to have leverage in negotiations is understandable. I think sometimes agents take it a little too far, but I always try to respect the fact that that player's average career is less than 4 years, and they spend so much time and effort putting themselves in position for that career, often at the cost of furthering their education or something else that might provide them another opportunity. So I think we try to balance that understanding. There's some folks that view their market value as much higher than we might, and those impasses exist. And again, we try not to make them personal. Oftentimes they become a little personal, but we try to keep them from becoming personal. But we have let go of players in the middle of contract negotiations because of those impasses. We've let players hold out a long time, and we've worked with agents at times maybe to say, okay, the continuity of our team this year is really, it's important every year, but we think this is a really good team, and have probably maybe given guys more money on a few occasions than we thought was appropriate. So it's really a case-by-case basis of how we approach that conversation. But that was a great question, Hunter.
Someone else? Remember to
I have a question. So, regarding COVID, obviously we're always thinking about that, and I was wondering if there's any restrictions that you guys have given players just to keep them safe and keep the Steelers community safe.
Absolutely, Carly. That's a good question, and so far they've been disciplined and have listened to them. But yeah, we've made it very clear that we expect them to go home, and it's not a pure quarantine, but to really limit contact, be aware of their kids in and out of school, and we don't require their kids to get tested, but to just make sure that they are aware as quickly as possible if someone in their life has come in contact with someone. Once they come inside of our bubble, I mean, it is a bubble, especially during training camp. We used our stadium, which is not normally where we have training camp, and we had, each player had their own suite, the luxury suites, as sort of their room to rest and to go through the playbook. We had the coaches separated in all parts of the stadium and on different floors. We had the scouts in one end zone, the media in another end zone. So we really tried to run training camp in a way that kept a significant amount of distance, except when folks were on field together. It's worked so far. We'll sort of see. Now, that is what the professor was talking about. We have a massive stadium. There's an advantage for us, and a team like Ohio State would have a similar advantage. But smaller schools, you just don't have the assets or resources and assets to create that type of distance. So So I think it is a particular challenge, but I will give our players credit for being as disciplined as they are. My brother Dan is a scout who lives in North Carolina. He's one of the top scouts for our team, and he came up to see my mother, and he was going to go down to Heinz Field to watch practice, and my brother Art, who's the president of the team, said, "You can't go in. You haven't been tested. We're not letting you in the bubble." And Dan said, "Well, I'm not going to go near anyone." And, my brother said, "No, you can't go inside the bubble, even if you don't get near anyone." So we've done a pretty good job being tight with this.
That's great. Somebody else?
I had another question, if that's okay.
Sure. I'm sorry, Professor. Seems like it's your class.
No, fine.
So obviously, like when it comes to NFL, very competitive. There can be on-field problems. How are those handled? I mean, last year you had the Browns in Pittsburgh with the whole Garrett and Rudolph incident that kind of became a big internet sensation. Like, obviously there's fines and stuff, but how are those handled on the inside? Are there meetings with the player talking about kind of what happened and how to handle those situations better?
Yeah, let me talk about that on a global level, because there have been, the Steelers have been involved in some incidents over the last decade that traditionally was not where we sort of ended up, and part of it has been a great sort of learning tool. And I don't know that we've completely learned our lesson, because I don't know that anyone completely understands how to create protocols. So we've always had this belief that we're the NFL, we're not college, and these folks are adults and they should be treated like adults. And we've given folks more second and third chances than people might expect from an organization that's had this much success. But the judgment we always make is, are they a distraction to the rest of the team? If someone has a personal problem, we've seen it as our responsibility to help them with that problem rather than get rid of them. If that problem becomes a problem for everyone else in the organization, we say, well, we can't afford to, we have to look out for the whole. That's our responsibility, while still trying to show some concern for that individual. So that's been an approach we've taken, and in this idea of letting people be adults, we've always let them, given folks sort of the go-ahead to speak to the media in the way that they see fit. We try to give them information, we try to make them understand that although we have great relationships with members of the media, that controversy sells newspapers or et cetera, and just be aware that some folks are going to ask you questions that are intentionally designed to agitate, and try not to take the bait. But overall, it's our belief that people should be transparent, and that's part of the organization. The social media world has turned that upside down. It used to be a group of folks that they were speaking to, whether we sort of love this journalist approach or not. You felt a sense that they studied journalism, that most times they were asking questions that were well researched and sort of had some sort of point. In social media, everyone has a viewpoint. A player, and especially the further we go, folks have become so familiar with how they engage they engage so regularly and in such a common form through social media, that they make these statements that they feel are just a simple expression. But as I said, we have upwards of 25 million fans, and all of a sudden a group of fans agree, disagree, you get into this major debate. Sports folks across the country kind of understand how big us, the Cowboys, the Patriots, some of these teams that have these large fan bases, they understand that agitating that fan base is going to give them greater social equity. So you're in sort of this game now that notoriety is oftentimes more important to a whole host of people than maybe authenticity or the truth. And again, I'm not trying to get on some soapbox here, but it has certainly changed the dynamic, and this idea that we expect people to be adults, but in treating them as adults, they can express themselves, is a real challenge, and it's a great learning point for you folks as students, because all organizations are trying to figure this out. How much do we say you work for us, and if you say something that we might think is stupid or not consistent with what we're trying to be about, organization, those lines, have become less clear. And so how do we all have our interaction on these social channels, but understand that whatever affinity groups or organizations we're part of are reflected by those statements. And it's a real challenge, I think, in every workplace, particularly in sports workplaces.
Somebody else?
So let me, you guys all good with the chat function? I'm gonna ask you folks a question. I have an answer. It's Jim Rooney's answer, so this isn't the official NFL answer on this, but it's my viewpoint, but I'm always interested to see how people look at this question. So, what do you think the largest competitor to the National Football League is? And you can think as broadly or as narrowly as you want on what you think is the biggest competitor from the standpoint of our industry.
You mean in terms of the team that's the greatest competitor, or?
Well, not on field, from a business standpoint.
From a business standpoint, okay.
I think soccer is because of like there's a lot of leagues and there's a lot of teams also, and also like there's a lot of competitions.
Zico, that's a great answer. I would put soccer up there ahead of any other sports league, including the NBA, which has been on a great trajectory before this COVID. But I think when you look, we're becoming much more of a global society, whether folks like that or not. We're becoming more of a global society, and soccer's footprint outside of the United States is so much larger than ours. Now, within the United States, where the infrastructure of the sports market is so much more mature and sophisticated, and dominates soccer. But when you think about it globally, that's a great answer. But that's not what I think the largest competition. So, someone wrote Cowboys, Washington football team, Steelers. Yeah, I'm not looking for on-field competition. I'm looking from a business industry standpoint.
I wrote that, Jim, and I've read that the Cowboys have the richest program. Is that incorrect?
The Cowboys are, yeah, but I see. Well, this is a great conversation. When I talked about the things in the collective bargaining agreement my father was involved with, there really was a decision back in the late 50s, 1960s around, are we all competitive with each other? Are we competitive with baseball, basketball, etc.? The NFL, and I think it's why we've dominated, decided that it's us as a league, that after the season, my brother and Bob Kraft from the Patriots are on the phone together every other day with business conversations as partners, not as competitors. So I think we've really created a differentiator by being one league. So the Cowboys' value is certainly greater than the Steelers' value when you're looking at that. And I think that's a good point from the standpoint of there are teams that have sort of broken away from that model that my father and some of those folks designed, and are looking to increase their values. And I think that's bad for small market, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis. I don't think that the idea that someone is so driven to increase the value of their organization is a good thing for us. But I still think there's one thing out there, and I'm interested to keep hearing folks that is an exponential shift in terms of how we have to approach our business.
Like you're talking like off field, like financially, correct?
Yeah, from a business standpoint. Yep.
So I'm talking with my buddy here who's also in on the Zoom. We're maybe politics, that seems to be kind of a big issue, like some people boycotting the NFL with, players kneeling and, players having a political platform kind of be addressed, they're adults, they can, say whatever kind of things they would like, and I'm totally fine with that, but I would say like
Well, I think that's a great answer. I think it's important. I'm certainly, you can guess with my father's commitment to race and equity throughout his career, sort of where he stands on these things, and I certainly stand there with him on that. But I do think to this point, the data has shown that in big presidential election years, those issues matter significantly. In non-presidential election years, we usually get back most of those fans who say they're going to boycott us forever. We'll see if that happens. But so I'm not going to dismiss that, but I don't have. I think by next, I actually think by December, folks will be. I don't want to say sick of the election process. It's such an important part of our lives, no matter what your viewpoints are. But I think everyone will want to rest, and we'll have a lot of fans watching football by Thanksgiving. But it's great answer, because it is something to be aware of. Any other thoughts?
Feel free to use the chat feature if you don't want to speak up. Oh.
Where's Clay?
Clay, identify yourself there. Wave your hand.
Yeah, I see it, Clay. Clay, I agree with you 100%. I think the biggest challenge is, the fact that your generation, well, all of us now, but that your generation is going to become comfortable with streaming and having content delivered on demand. So, for the last, my entire life, in the last 70 years of the NFL, there's this statement: we own Sunday afternoons, and people would tune in and they would set their schedule around Sunday afternoon. Now, you folks, all of us again, but it's becoming so much more commonplace for you folks, that entertainment is at your fingertips, and you can decide when, where, and how you want to consume entertainment. So, and I use this question because I think it's important, if you're interested in sports, to really begin to understand, what can you do to provide added value in relationship to streaming content. So we have to create something for 3 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours, however long we can get folks to watch on Sundays and then Monday nights, Thursdays, that there's so much interest and the engagement level is so high, so exciting, that you say, okay, I'm going to schedule that, because there's so, what you're starting to, and again, it's bleeding up into my generation, consume content has to do with my preferences, my time, when I'm available to do that. And this dynamic shift is it's just driving the entertainment marketplace in such a significant way. So what alternatives can we make in the sports industry? How do we create something that is so engaging and entertaining, and you feel that need and desire to engage, find interest, to stay part of what we're doing for 3 hours if you're a Steeler fan, or all afternoon on Sunday and Sunday night if you're a football fan. And one of the elements is one I don't really like. I think it's always been there. And my family actually has owned horse tracks, so I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, but I think there is an inherent risk of gambling on endeavors that people are involved in, but it is a differentiator in this space. If you have money on the line, you're going to pay attention for those 3 hours. I like fantasy because I think it's less of a pure bet. So that's a way of engaging. But how do we create things? And I think it's an opportunity. Again, I'll speak in a couple of minutes here to you folks related to how where there might be opportunities for you folks, but really looking at what is more intuitive and natural to you in terms of these different platforms, social platforms, digital video platforms, all this type of asymmetric entertainment understanding how to create, manage, and promote mechanisms that allow that are going to be required if we're going to be, successful and effective within this very competitive and very dynamic entertainment environment. So that's my big challenge, and Clay, you got that pretty well. I think that's the biggest challenge. Any other comments that folks want to make on competition, where they think? So here's a question from Grant. How is the NFL looking to grow globally? Is it something that is important to the league? Yes, it's very important to the league. We try to grow internationally as a league, but I get in trouble with the NFL for saying this, but I believe it's true. There's no real NFL fans. You folks are either Steeler fans or Browns fans or Bengals fans. People are fans of the teams, and so we work in partnership. The Steelers, the Cowboys, the Patriots, in particular, and the Jaguars actually have been pretty aggressive at trying to build our fan bases in international markets. Now, because of social media, the barrier is much lower than what it used to be, and I think that's an important opportunity. We're now doing some stuff in India, which we've done very little to sort of lay the groundwork, but we have over 250,000 followers on our social channels in India, and we've never done anything. Now, Mexico, the Steelers have the second largest affinity in Mexico behind the Cowboys. We spend a lot of time with our Spanish radio station, building content for our website in Spanish, making visits there with former players, doing a whole host of things to enhance engagement there. We also approach Germany as a priority for us because the Steelers have always had a significant affinity base from folks in the military. So because of the military bases in Germany, we've created a pretty big footprint there. So we have been proactive in doing that. The Cowboys have, the Patriots have, as I said, the Jaguars have, particularly in London. And then the league has overall. It's a challenge because our sport is different than, there's some analogies to rugby, which rugby has been growing, but the stoppage in play is so counterintuitive to folks in international markets. They're used to soccer and other games that there's very few play stoppages, and the fact that our plays stop at every play, really sort of they feel it's boring. What we've tried to educate and inform folks on is the complexities that we're able to create because of that. Every play, the defense can change not just its personnel, but its strategy and different tactics for that specific play. And so building some level of interest in that, we think is our value, but it is a challenge because it's much less intuitive going from soccer to basketball or hockey, which are soccer, basketball, and hockey are basically the same sport. You have an object, a ball of some sort, you're trying to get it into a net, and the other team is defending you from doing that. And everyone fundamentally, other than goalies, have the same skill sets. We have, and it's what we think is great about football, but you have quarterback, you have receivers, you have offensive linemen, you have running backs. So on the offensive side, you have 4 distinct position groups. You can throw tight ends in there with that kind of combination. Defense, you basically have 3 distinct position groups: offense, defensive line, linebackers, and special teams. So getting people interested in the complexity that allows you versus the beauty and the simplicity of the games that do it the other way, and that folks already understand. That's a global challenge.
Jim, you gave me a good segue to a question I just have to ask you before it's all over. You had one of the greatest backs. You had Franco, and at the same time, Jim Brown was playing. And I'm just wondering, in your opinion, who's the greatest running back? Gail Sayers just died yesterday. What do you think?
Jim Brown is the greatest person to ever put on a football uniform.
Okay, interesting.
And I've said that on a stage with Franco sitting next to me to my right and Jim Brown on the other side. And Franco got up and concurred with me saying that.
Wow, interesting. It's too bad my class, none of them got a chance to watch Jim Brown play, because he was tremendous.
Yeah, he was, you know, we can talk about Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's very special, but, you know, he's not part of the tackling element of the game the same way Jim Brown was.
Mm-hmm. I see another question on the chat.
I'm getting old, folks. I have to stare at the top of that. Are you losing money? Does it affect me most to go? So you know, like so many folks were losing money during COVID, or losing revenue opportunities. So we shut down 5 concerts this summer that were some pretty good concerts. I think we did Taylor Swift this summer in the Rolling Stones. So those are revenue streams that we get the majority of, because we have the promotion rights around our stadium, which again is part of this industry. So it's not just sports. When you get into this industry, it's usually management, promotion of the opportunities of that venue. So before a player even came to camp, we lost a significant amount of money this year. And with no fans, which is our expectation probably till Thanksgiving, we think there might be a change then, but again, that depends on the trajectory of you know, the caseload of COVID in Western Pennsylvania, probably nationally. So you know, that affects the folks in marketing and ticket sales. Now, we sell most of our tickets through season ticket packages, so you know, those jobs are affected. We have done nothing in terms of laying anyone off. Now, it does have a big impact on game day. We have 400 additional part-time employees. Obviously, those jobs don't exist. You know, we're not bringing folks in on a part-time basis for games that well, there's games being played, but there's no fans in the stands. So that it does have a significant impact on their lives. And again, this is where the NFL just has such a massive advantage, is that our television contracts are multi-year, they're league-wide, and we share the revenue amongst our teams. So it's going to be difficult for us as a business, but the you know, the pain is less. We created a special deal with our Players Association with the collective bargaining agreement, so that next year, when that would really hit the salary cap, we created a floor so that, you know, we don't go significantly under the salary cap next year. So you know, that's where we are. But again, folks in other sports that really rely on, you know, local audiences, that rely on local television contracts, you know, it's going to be a real challenge for them.
That's why we've seen minor league baseball shut down.
You guys were talking about some players there, Jim Brown, Franco. Can you talk about kind of the importance that veteran players play on just the overall culture of the organization? I know you guys were without Big Ben last year, and he's back, seems to make some big changes in his life, looking good, feeling good. And he's got some younger guys around him on, you know, the wide receiver side of things, Juju and Claypool. Like, how does having Big Ben back and those veteran players, you know, kind of affect that culture?
Hunter, that's a great question, and the most obvious sign that we brought the right person in is, once they've been around a while, are they willing to teach a younger player what they've learned? Because they are effectively giving them knowledge that will help them compete and push them out of their job. But we've always had folks who had that generosity, who understood that there's a next generation, who had that willingness to develop folks under them. And when you have a culture like that, I think you can create sustained success, because they really, you know, the younger folks are willing and interested in learning from these folks, and the older folks understand that there's a level of sacrifice, but that they're making the team better by doing this, and their chance of winning a championship within that time frame is heightened, because they're improving who might be their backup eventually be their competitor. So, so the biggest role that a veteran player can provide is providing insight and education, if you will, for younger folks. The other thing is it creates continuity. The coaches can be moving forward and pushing innovation and new plans rather than always being involved in remedial things. So my father always said that the most important thing, the worst thing you can do to an employee is confuse them, whether it's a player or someone else in the organization. Never try to confuse employees. Let them understand where they stand, what their responsibilities are. And if you do that, these ideas of culture, which he hated that word, he hated leadership culture. All the terms we use, he always just said, we just try to do the right thing. So, but in the context of how we understand them in the business world, which he was a great businessman, I think those are some substantial pieces to it, and not having people confused, I think, is a really important element of culture.
I have a question that goes along with that. I had read Tony Dungy's book, Mentor Leadership.
Yep.
And he talked about how previous players and coaches like Joe Green and Chuck Noll had a huge impact on him. Who are the best mentor leaders on the current Steelers team?
Sorry. Cam Hayward is a great mentor leader. Vince Williams, one of our linebackers. Joe Hayden, who came from the Browns. All of these folks I think they've been around the league a long time. Marquise Pouncey, our center, and then obviously Ben. Ben's interesting. I think Cam is the second most senior player on our team. Could be Cam or Pouncey. Both of them. Ben was in the league almost 10 years. I think it was 6 and 8 years before them. So that's how much older he is. So he plays an important role as a quarterback and as sort of being this much, having been around that much longer. But these folks are in their position groups. There's more people in those position groups, and then you see guys like T.J. Watt and Minka, getting further along in their first contracts. As I said, sort of working to emulate what some of these folks who've been around longer have done. So it's always nice when you see those mentor leaders, but it's also just as inspiring to see the generation who's about to take that on, and when you can see them anticipating that and beginning to embrace this quality. And Tony did such a fantastic job at that. He was just, I was a ball boy for the defensive backs back when he was our defensive back and then defensive coordinator. And so I spent every day of my summers from 9th grade until my sophomore year in college working with Tony Dungy. And, I was with him at the Super Bowl. He's just a fantastic man. Well, folks, I got to jump to a 10 o'clock call. If it's okay, Professor, I'll give you folks my 2 cents on sort of where do you go from here.
Please do.
You think that would be helpful?
That'd be great.
So look, my father was known for being, a straightforward guy. So I'm not going to, BS you guys. The next, 24 to 36 months are going to be difficult, and they're going to be difficult in the sports world. So, if you're able to stay in school longer, if you're able to sort of do something like that, I would recommend it. If you're not, find a self-study, find a way to really increase your awareness and your interest in this while you get a job. Look, I hope you all get jobs in the sports world, right when you graduate, but I don't want to, make this, I don't want to be Pollyannic about this. It's going to be tough. Having said that, the piece I talked about, it's why I bring it up with students, this idea of us versus Netflix is so important, and in every aspect of our business now, all of these components, social media, greater access and understanding of technology, everything from accounting to how we evaluate players to how we create content to stay connected to our fans. I mean, that is our world, like so many others' worlds. So really, the things that you're familiar with, really embrace them more and more and get to understand them in ways that as I said, they may seem natural and intuitive to you, but be able to think about how you can use that natural understanding in a way that you can really deliver value to an organization. The other thing I would recommend is, and this one's a little bit odd, but it's great. I think it's so essential. We don't manufacture steel. We don't create a cure for cancer. We are involved in this very unique vicarious relationship that folks are surrendering some amount of their time to basically live a dream or a fantasy, whatever you want to call it, that they can't achieve themselves. And it's a really unique experience. And everyone in entertainment is doing it, but sports, I think, captures something because of the drama in the moment that is really unique and special to people. The better you can understand the nuance of that relationship between a fan and either the athlete or the team that they have this affinity for, the better. Because again, they're not going to get a return like they would when they go to the store and buy butter, or when they buy a car made of steel, etc. So really understanding the subtlety, the nuance, how those relationships, how that relationship plays out within individuals' mindsets is so important. So go to a minor league team, put on the mascot costume, work, sell tickets in the afternoon, drive the coach to the airport in the evening, get as much of an understanding of how sports works and where and when that unique relationship between our consumer base, our customers, and that organization plays out, because it is different than a product-based company in such a deep and meaningful way. The more you can understand that, the more value you're going to be able to provide to the team. And then the last piece is the piece I said, the answer I said to the professor when we first started. Work on a skill set. We love when folks come in and they're fans, but we're hiring you to run our finance department, or start a job in our content development, as part of our content development team. Even if you're a scout, we don't want to know that you love the Steeler players. We want to know that you can help evaluate the next group of players coming up, and that you can make good assessments on that. So those are some of the things that I think are important. And then finally, look, these are tough times.